Shalom, everyone. I'm Brother Doug. Sorry about that. Had my mic muted for some weird reason. Today, we're going to be continuing our Torah readings. I think today, for a change, I noticed that the Kindle on the phone is kind of small print unless you have it sideways. So I know that you guys will be able to see the My Sword pretty decently. So what I'm going to do for you guys is I'm going to actually have the Septuagint, the LXXE Bretons on the shared screen while I will be using these for today's reading. Okay. I would really recommend, if you're looking into the Aramaic Targums of the Torah, which Targum just means translation. So what these are Aramaic translations of the Torah. They're a manuscript which basically, instead of the Koine Greek translation of an earlier Paleo-Hebrew, this is a Aramaic translation of a Paleo-Hebrew earlier manuscript, which probably, the legend goes, just a little background so you guys know what these Targums are. So basically, the legend is that orally, this translation, Aramaic translation of the Torah, was passed down orally from one Judean to another around the time of the exile of those that came back to the land from Babylon. So orally, it was passed down between probably 300 to 400 BC. I'd be guessing, probably 100 years before the Septuagint. Problem is that these were not written down until 1st to 2nd century BC. So that's part of the problem, is they weren't physically written down until much later. So they kept orally being passed down as what scholars would call paraphrase versions of the Torah. So I would still, personally, me speaking, I still trust in the Septuagint the majority of the time before any other manuscript or paraphrase manuscript of the Torah, unless it agrees with Yahuwah's character more than what version we have of the Septuagint today, which we really don't even have the original of anything anyway. We're dealing with English translations from the Greek or Aramaic or Hebrew into English, plus the fact we're dealing with handed down information. Like I've said many times before, we don't have the original manuscripts in front of us. So again, but anyway, so I'm going to be checking these out today for our reading. I'm going to be reading both of these side by side, and I'll put the Bretton's English Septuagint for you viewers and listeners so you can see what I'm reading on my screen, the chapter I'm reading from the Septuagint. So I will be using the Targum Onkelos and Jerusalem Targum because from what I've studied, they're the two Targums that seem to be very legitimate. There is a third one called the Targum of Jonathan on the Pentateuch, but as far as trusting for doctrine, there are very few things I trust for doctrine from because it includes a lot of Talmudic, what's the word I'm looking for? A lot of Talmudic commentary that Jonathan actually put into the text, that he would add like his own commentary into the actual verse. So that's why I trust these other two Targums more. Let's see here. And mainly I trust the Targum Onkelos because it's the oldest according to Encyclopedia Britannica. It's the first one that was ever written down. It's the earliest one that was ever written down, so that makes me trust it the most. Okay, so here we go. We're going to start with Leviticus 15 today, guys. All right, so just bear with me here. I'm going to open up Leviticus 15 with my physical scriptures while you guys see this on the shared screen. So, okay. All right, so let me just make sure. I want to make sure this is actually okay. I just want to make sure it's on the shared screen. Okay. Let me just make sure it's actually working. Okay. Leviticus is page 89. All right. So you guys should be seeing Leviticus 15 from the LXXE on there. Okay. Just bear with me, guys. I'm going to open up to it really quick here. Okay. So, all right. What the heck? Did I misread the table of contents here? Oh, I see. I don't know why they did that. That was so stupid. It's actually 161 it starts at. Okay. All right, so Leviticus 15, we'll start at here. All right, sorry about that, guys. Should have had this already propped up here. Okay, here we go. Now I just need to put the Targum Jerusalem there. Let's see here. So Targum Jerusalem, page 95. Okay. And just awarding the Jerusalem Targum is very fragmented, so that's the only issue with this. So that's why I have to use the Targum and Kalos here as my main Targum to look at. Let's see here. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Here we go, guys. All right, here we go. We're going to start the reading now, finally. Okay. All right. Here. And Yahuwah spake with Moshe and Aharon, saying, Speak to the sons of Yasharal and say to them, when any man has a defluxion by the running of his flesh, he is unclean. Okay, so the difference there, obviously, you see on the screen is a flux or a flow from his flesh versus the Septuagint actually outright says gonorrhea. That's interesting. Gonorrhea out of his body, this is his uncleanness, him by the reason of the issue by which his body is affected through the issue. All the days of the issue of his body by which his body is affected through the issue, there's his uncleanness. I actually like the fact that the Septuagint is a little bit more specific what this flow is actually referring to. I kind of like that. Okay. Verse 3, and this shall be his uncleanness by his defluxion, when his defluxion flowed from his flesh, or his flesh has ceased from its flowing, it is the cause of his uncleanness. Okay. Okay. All right. So the law of his uncleanness, whoever has a gonorrhea out of his body, this is his uncleanness in him by reason of the issue by which his body is affected through the issue, all the days of the issue of his body by which his body is affected through the issue, there is his uncleanness. Okay, so now we're at verse 4. All right. Every bed, so right here, every bed whereon he lies, who has the flow, shall be unclean, and anything where he sits shall be unclean. Okay. Happen to unclean. Yeah, same thing with the Septuagint, so we'll just move on there, right? Okay, verse 5, and whoever touches his bed shall wash his clothes, bathe himself in water, and be unclean until evening. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. Going to verse 6 because it's pretty much the same in the Septuagint there, as you can see. Verse 6, and he who sits on a thing whereon he who has the issue has sat shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. And he that touches the skin of him that has the issue shall wash his garments and bathe himself in water and shall be unclean till evening. Yeah, almost word for word verbatim, verse 7 there. So we're going to move down to verse 8. Okay, guys. And if he that has the issue should spit on the one that is clean, that person shall wash his garments and bathe himself in water and be unclean till evening. Okay. Okay. And every donkey saddle on which the man with the issue shall have mounted shall be unclean till evening. Okay. Now, what I find interesting here, even though I can't show you guys, is that the Targum on Kalos here is actually missing in verse 9 till evening. So that's another point for Septuagint there in verse 9. Okay. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Okay. So, and everyone that touches whatsoever shall have been under him shall be unclean. A matter of fact, guys, hold on. I don't want you to just take my word for it. So obviously, you guys can see here LXXE till evening, right? Verse 9. So what I'm going to do for you guys to show you guys I'm not pulling any tricks. Hold on for a second. This thing wants to be stupid now. Doesn't want to allow me to exit out of here. Okay. I'm just going to show you guys real quick from the Targum on Kalos on my Kindle here that I'm not lying to you, and that till evening is missing here. And we'll check all three. We'll see if any of the three have the till evening. So Targum Jerusalem, that's already eliminated because it's that verse is not there, and in that version, it's not a complete Torah. It's very fragmented, so we're not even going to try to look there. So first, I'm going to show you guys the Targum on Kalos that it's not there. So we're going to go to so all right. So we're going to be looking at, see right here, as you guys can see here, shall be unclean. Says nothing about until evening, right? So just want to show you guys I'm not making this stuff up. So as you can see there, the till evening is omitted in verse 9. We're going to go. So now we're going to go to the Jonathan one. Hopefully the Jonathan one has it. If not, we have an issue with the Targums here. Because that's something big to leave out, the till evening. That's, in my opinion, that's a huge issue to leave out. This is why you test all things, guys. I hope you're seeing you can't take anything, trust anything 110% in modern day with these modern translations we have. Because there's issues like this. All right, so let me just see here. Should be a way. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to start. We're here where I can navigate to Leviticus here. So it will kind of make it a little bit quicker, guys. Yeah. Now the Targum and Jonathan, I will be really shocked since it's a very loose paraphrase. I'll be very surprised if they don't have till evening in that verse. I will be shocked. But we're looking for Leviticus 15, verse 9, just to keep on track, guys. Wow. Not good. Not good for the Targums here. So as you can see, verse 9 there, it says, the saddle upon which he who has an issue rides shall be unclean. The till evening is missing, it seems like, in every other version, I guess, other than the Septuagint. I will be checking, guys, after this recording is done. I will be checking the Samaritan Pentateuch. I mean, we could probably even check to see in the Masoretic. Yeah, the Masoretic is showing it's not there either, which is very surprising. Wow. So we have an issue with the Targums and the Masoretic here having no till evening, which that's a huge issue, guys. It's a really huge issue to leave something out like that. Okay, as you can see, till evening. Okay, so, and just to show you guys, I'm not monkeying around. I'll give you the ABP plus here, just to show you I'm not monkeying around. I'm not being biased here, guys. Until G2193 evening, G2073. So again, guys, take the Targums with a grain of salt. Sometimes they mess up even where the Masoretic messes up. So just keep that in mind. Okay. And again, like I said before we started this study, the Targums, even though they were orally passed down, maybe a couple hundred years before the Septuagint, when they came back from Babylon to when the Judeans came back from Babylon to the land, it wasn't actually physically written down. According to most scholars, they would have been not written down. The earliest Targums would have been written down in 1 to 200 AD, which is a good 300 or 400 years after the Septuagint was written down in 285 BC. So there's a huge gap between when it was being orally passed down to when it was being written down. And so again, that's the issue. So again, that's why I would trust the Septuagint as a whole a little bit more than the Targums. Okay. So anyway, sorry for the tangent there. Just trying to explain. All right. So it says, verse 10, and whoever touches anything that have been under him shall be unclean till evening. Okay. Okay, so to touch anything. Now this is interesting. The Targum is like missing a half a verse here in the Targum on Kalos. Or we're gonna have to check this one too. Okay, so the Septuagint, as you see on the screen here, has the first part that the Targum has in this verse, but then there's a whole second half. It says, and he that takes them up shall wash his garments and bathe himself in water, and he shall be unclean until evening. There's no mention of bathing or washing his garments, and he'll be unclean till evening. The unclean till evening is only on this first part of the verse. So basically the Targum is missing the whole second half of verse 10 there. So I'm gonna have to start making notes about this, guys, man. This is crazy. So hold on a second, guys. I definitely need to make some notes about this. Hold on a second. Let's see here. I want to see if I can just pause the recording real quick. I'll be right back. I'll be back shortly, guys. All right, we're back. Sorry about that, guys. I just had to take a brief intermission. All right, so we're going to go back. We're going to finish this chapter. All right, so we're up to verse 11 here, right? So these are the laws of the uncleanness if a man has a flowing from his body, right? So, and what happens, and what you're supposed to do if you touch anything he's touched, or you sit on a saddle that he sat on, right? So on and so forth. Okay, guys. So pretty much self-explanatory, right? So I just wanted to write down the two notes I had from verse 9 and verse 10 later on, as we're being very, very cautious, right? With testing these different versions of the Torah here, and I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible. So mind you, and whomsoever he that has the issue shall touch, if he has not rinsed his hands in water, he shall wash his garments and bathe his body in water, and shall be unclean till evening. Okay, so we have the clean till evening both here, right? Pretty much the same thing here. Okay. 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 Now we're up to verse 12 here. If an earthen vessel which he has the issue shall happen to touch, he shall be broken, and a wooden vessel shall be washed with water and shall be clean. So this is pretty interesting here. Okay. Pretty much the same thing. We kind of see this interesting coincidence. I wouldn't say coincidence, but some similarity in verse 12 here with kind of reminds me of Leviticus 11, where if an unclean animal touches a wooden vessel, you not wooden, earthen vessel, you need to break it. So that's kind of interesting. That's very interesting. So okay, so and if he that has the issue should be cleansed of his issue, then shall he number to himself 7 days for his purification. He shall wash his garments and bathe his body in water, and shall be unclean. Okay. Okay. The only difference I see here is obviously with the Targum and Kalos in front of me, instead of issue, it says deflux, which basically means a flow, either a flow of blood or a flow of some type of um, some type of flow. Possibly in the man's case, it'd be a flow from his private part. So that would make sense why the Septuagint started this chapter off talking about gonorrhea. It would make the most sense. So this is talking about some type of disease flowing out of him. And on the 8th day he shall take to himself 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, and he shall bring them before Yahuwah to the doors of the tabernacle witness, and shall give them to the priest. Okay. Okay, same thing there. So we're moving on to verse 15 now. And the priest shall offer them, one for a sin offering, the other for a whole burnt offering. The priest shall make atonement for him before Yahuwah for his issue. Okay. So let's see if there's any difference here. Okay. Now the only difference I see here is the Septuagint says whole burnt offering instead of burnt offering. So which would mean that it would be wholly consumed. It would not be eaten. It would be like fully burnt on the altar. So which is pretty interesting. So and the man whose seed of copulation shall happen to go forth from him shall then wash his whole body and shall be unclean till evening. Now, this seems to be in general, whether you're ceremoniously clean or unclean, that the man whose seed of copulation, so meaning any seed that goes from you if you have intercourse with your wife, okay, all of our brothers out there. So if you have relations with your wife, you are ritually unclean till evening. Okay. And you need to bathe and you need to wash your whole body and you'll be unclean until evening. So that's pretty self-explanatory. I don't think any version of that verse will be different. Okay. What I'm noticing here is the Targum on Kalos does not have that verse there. I wonder why that is. So hold on a second, guys. So for the most parts, yeah. So, all right. Since the Targum of Onkelos does not have verse 17, I'm going with the Targum of Jonathan here, guys. Okay, so bear with me here. And pretty much the majority of this chapter is omitted from the Jerusalem Targum, so I have to go to this Targum of Jonathan here. Okay. Okay, so we're at I think verse 16 or 17 here, right? So okay. Yes, 17. Okay. Okay, verse 17 here from the Targum of Jonathan. And any garment or skin on which the seed may be shall be washed in water and shall be unclean till evening. Now that's interesting. So okay. Okay. Okay, so that's pretty self-explanatory. So wherever the seed lies on, whatever type of clothing or garment or skin, you are to wash it, and it will be unclean till evening. So, okay. And a woman, okay, with whom a man lies shall wash in 40 seas of water and shall be unclean till the evening. So here we go. We got Jonathan embellishing a little bit here. You can kind of see how the Talmudic Judaism was already creeping in around the 1st century AD. 40 seas of water. So now they're making exact measurements where obviously in an earlier manuscript here with the Septuagint, there's no exact measurements. And a woman, if a man shall lie with her, see the copulation, they shall both bathe themselves in water and shall be unclean till evening. So the Targum of Jonathan is not even it's not even basically mentioning the man, which I find a little bit weird. It's only mentioning the woman in verse 18, and then it's giving you exact measurement, which you got to start understanding. This is exactly why he was getting mad, because they were adding to the Torah. So to the Torah, okay. Who's calling me? Stop calling right now. Please stop calling. I'm busy right now. Sorry. All right. So here we go. I mean, at least, and I'm going back here just to check with the Jonathan one because I'm curious now. Okay. Yeah. At least the Unkalos one has both of them saying they may wash themselves and be unclean till evening. So that whole 40 seas of water is not mentioned in the Unkalos one. Mind you, guys, Jonathan ben Uziel has been documented. He was under Hillel, the Rabbi Hillel. So again, you're starting to see the Talmudic sect of the Judeans starting to creep in. Okay, very Talmudic, adding to the Torah. Okay, so anyway, I thought that was interesting. So going back to the Unkalos there because that was pretty bad. Let's see here. And the woman whosoever shall have an issue of blood, when her issue shall be in her body, shall be 7 days in her separation. Everyone that touches her shall be unclean till evening. Okay, so now obviously the deflux is talking about her blood flow here. 7 days shall be for her separation. Whosoever touches her shall be unclean till evening. Okay. All right. So that was verse 19. Now we're going to verse 20 here. And everything whereon she shall lie in her separation shall be unclean. And anything that she sits upon shall be unclean. And anyone who touches her bed shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean till evening. Okay. Okay. All right. So let's see here. Okay. Everything which lies in her separation shall be unclean. Anything that she sits upon shall be unclean. Okay. That's pretty much the same thing for verse 20 there. Okay, almost word for word there with the Unkalos and the Septuagint. Okay. And whosoever shall touch her bed shall wash his garments and bathe his body in water and shall be unclean until evening. Okay. So whoever shall touch her bed shall wash his garments and bathe his body in water and shall be unclean till evening. So, all right. So whoever touches her bed has to wash his garments and bathe in water, bathe his whole body in water, and he will be unclean till evening. So again, same thing word for word with the Unkalos there. Okay. Now we're going to verse 22. And everyone that touches any vessel on which she shall sit shall wash his garments and bathe himself in water and shall be unclean till evening. Okay. Now, I would assume that touches any vessel on which she shall sit, that would be referring to a chair, couch, bench. I mean, in modern day, I'm trying to think of modern applications to this here. Okay. So I'm just checking to see if there's any difference on which she has sat, shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. Okay. All right, so now we are going to verse 23. And if it be on her bed or anything on which she has sat when he has touched it, he shall be unclean until evening. Okay. Okay, I like how it says seat for the Septuagint here. The LXXE actually says on her bed or seat or anything happen to sit upon when he touches her, he shall be unclean till evening. So I'm trying to understand this verse here. Is this referring to him just touching her in general? I guess. And whether it be while she is on her bed or on a seat which she may happen to sit upon when he touches her, he shall be unclean till evening. Now, I would have to agree with the Targum on Kalos here. Her doesn't make sense because it's referring to where she's sitting and what she's sat upon. If he sits upon things that she's sat upon, he's unclean till evening. So I would have to go with the Targum on Kalos here says, when he has touched it, he shall be unclean till evening. That makes a lot more sense. So I think Breton screwed up with the Greek word there. He translated it instead of it, translated it as her. Very weird. Okay, so I agree with Kalos on that verse. And if anyone shall lie with her and her uncleanness be upon him, he shall be unclean 7 days, and every bed on which he shall have lain shall be unclean. Okay. All right. And after we read this chapter, I'm going to make a little note about verse 24 here, because in other places in the Torah, it shows that you're not supposed to lie with a woman during her uncleanness, her flow of uncleanness, her period. So we'll actually go to that verse after this chapter, and I'll show you that cross reference, because I know this would seem to see, well, it's not really sin to lie with a woman during her period. You're just unclean for 7 days. Okay. Hold on. I got a cross reference for this on my cross references. Hold on. Yeah, right here. So I'll make a little note here for you guys. As you can see here, it says Leviticus 18, verse 19, you shall not go into a woman under separation for her uncleanness to uncover her nakedness. So as you see here, this is not an allowance by the Father. Okay, this is him saying, in case of something, in case this happens, this is what you're supposed to do. He's not giving you allowance to go into your wife during her period. Okay. In any bed where he lies shall be unclean. Okay. Verse 25. And if a woman has defluxion of blood many days beyond the time of her separation, if it run beyond the time of her separation, all the days of the issue of her uncleanness shall be as the days of her separation. She shall be unclean. Okay. Wow. Okay. So not in the time of her separation. If the blood should also flow after her separation, all the days of the issue out of her unclean shall be as the days of her separation, she shall be unclean. So this is talking about if it's not really a normal period, but she's having a flow of blood, not in her monthly separation. So that's what it's talking about here. So it's saying she will be unclean because she's having a flow of blood from, from her private area down there. Okay. So verse 26, and it says, and any bed on which she lies all the days of her flow shall be as the bed of her separation. Everything on which she sits shall be unclean as the uncleanness of her separation. Okay. Every seat whereupon she shall sit shall be unclean until according to the uncleanness of her separation. All right, now we're going to verse 27. There's no real differences there. And whosoever touches them shall be unclean, shall wash his clothes and bathe in water, and be unclean till evening. Okay. All right, pretty much the same thing. Okay, but if she shall be cleansed from her flow, then she shall number to herself 7 days, and afterwards she shall be esteemed clean. That's interesting. Okay. She's cleansed from her deflux, then her number herself 7 days, and afterwards she is clean. I like how the Septuagint says esteemed clean, so they give a little bit more emphasis. It's very interesting. But still the same thing with the 7 days. She has to number 7 days to be cleansed from her flux, from her flow. Okay. Verse 29 here says, and on the 8th day, let her take of herself 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons and bring them to the priest at the door of the tabernacle of ordinance. Okay. And the priest shall make the one a sin offering, the one a burnt offering. The priest shall atone before Yahuwah the issue of her uncleanness. Okay, so, all right. So pretty much the same with the man goes with the female. On the eighth day, the female, for her flow, for her uncleanness, she has to bring in a whole burnt offering of one turtle dove. The other turtle dove's a sin offering. And then the priest, meaning the Levite, shall make atonement for her before Yahuwah for the unclean flux. Now, obviously, in the Melchizedek priesthood, Yahusha is our atonement, right? He is the atoning sacrifices for our sins. So I would say that if I'm going to be honest with the new covenant, this particular part of the uncleanness of Leviticus 15, I don't believe that is going to be carried over into the new covenant as far as the to make atonement. The sins, at least the sin sacrifice part of it, I definitely don't think you're going to be seeing in the millennial kingdom in the new Levitical priesthood. I doubt you're going to be seeing sin sacrifices again. So could there still be a whole burnt offering of a turtle dove that when the Levites serve Yahusha, when they serve Yahuwah sitting on that throne in the millennial, could we be seeing still the whole burnt offering carried over? Very possible, but again, that's speculation. Anyway, so verse 31 here. And thus shall you separate the children of Yasharal from their uncleanness, and they die not by defiling my tabernacle, which is among them. Okay, so a lot of people will say that this means that you only do these commandments when the temple is around, that it's referring to going into the temple in Jerusalem or the tabernacle in the wilderness. The problem what I have with that is that the tabernacle is not even mentioned until verse 31 of this chapter. Everything else leading up to it has to do with uncleanness that you can pretty much keep wherever you are. So to say that verse 31 of Leviticus 15 is only referring to if there's a temple that's already built and established in Jerusalem, that's only when we need to be keeping these commandments, or that's the only place to keep these commandments, doesn't make sense to me. Verses 1 to 30 clearly, or even if you say, okay, 30 starts with the Levitical stuff with the priest, verses 1 to 29, you can keep wherever you are. You can keep in captivity. To me, it's not dependent whatsoever on the Levitical priesthood whatsoever. Other than the turtle doves and the sacrifice portion of it, I get where you could get that idea. But as far as the uncleanness in general, touching something, if your wife has a period, touching something that she touched, you can easily abstain from that, where you are. So that, to me, that's not dependent on a Levitical priesthood. So I would disagree with that interpretation, that it's only for when a temple's up, according to some people's interpretation of verse 31. But I don't believe it's saying that at all. I think that's a misinterpretation, in my opinion. Anyway, this is the law for him who has an issue or whose seed goes from him and who is defiled therewith. Okay. And this is the law for her that has the issue of blood in her separation. And as to the person who has an issue of seed in his issue, it is a law for the male and female, and for the man who shall have lain with her, that is set apart. Okay, which is interesting. I agree with this, with the Onkelos here, because it says verse 33, it says unclean instead of set apart, which makes sense because this is a law dealing with uncleanness. So in context, the Onkelos here in verse 33, I would take over the Septuagint. I don't know if Breton messed up with that word there, because it doesn't really make sense that she's set apart, yet she's actually richly unclean. So to me, that doesn't really make much sense. for the male and female, and for the man who shall have lain with her, that is unclean. So again, I would address, I don't think verse 24 is giving you the license to have intercourse with your wife during her flow of blood during her monthly period. Again, I would recommend reading Leviticus 18, verse 19 before making that assumption. So I think that's it for today's study. I pray that you enjoyed this study and you got something out of it. I will be departing shortly, guys. I'm making these meetings a lot more straight to the point, just because, as you guys know, I've moved and I have a lot of stuff to get going. A lot of stuff to get through. So I still got a lot of errands to be doing now that I'm moved, and a lot of stuff to take care of. So I pray that. Hold on, let me take my hat off. I don't want to have my head covered or veiled while I say something like a prayer. My prayer today would be that you guys got something out of this, mainly that our brothers and sisters actually were watching this and you were seeing the differences with the Targums and the Septuagint. So overall, I think the Targum on Kalos that I was reading today, for the most part, other than that one verse 17, that wasn't there, that I had to go to the Jonathan to test which better version is. So, and again, the Targum and Jonathan is adding to that one verse. So again, I would really recommend you guys, if you're going to trust in one of the Targums as one of your main sources for the Torah, along with the Septuagint, I would recommend this one. This guy's Targum, Aramaic Targum, actually is pretty solid. And like I said before, you can look it up, Encyclopedia Britannica. .com, just search Targums. You will find out that this is the earliest written down Targum out there. So again, this is probably the most accurate word for word Aramaic translation of a Paleo Hebrew Torah that's been translated into English. So I really recommend, if you're going to get the English translations, get the Tov Rose translations, or get the James Wesley Etheridge, J.W. Etheridge translation. Those seem to be the two best ones out there. So again, so take the Targums to Jonathan. My brothers and sisters that already bought all three Targums, take the Jonathan one with a grain of salt with a lot of the stuff, because again, he was under Hillel, the Rabbi Hillel, in the Talmudic period, and according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, the later Targums would have not even been written down, even though they're orally passed down from the time of Daniel all the way up to early 1st century AD. The time of Daniel's Babylonian captivity, the end of the Babylonian captivity and the exile back to the land, even though they were orally passed down. Even the earliest one, this one, was not written down until 1 to 200 AD, and the later ones, like the Jonathan one, possibly wasn't even written down until 4th to 5th century AD, which obviously the origins of Judaism, if you look up in history, you'll start seeing around 4th to 5th century AD, they start really getting into the synagogue, and, they start really, the synagogues are already established at that point. The adding to the Torah, as you saw today in the Targum of Jonathan, it's already being started. What people believe in Judaism today, with all these added rules that the Father never commanded, pretty much goes back to the 4th, 5th century time period of the AD, like 500 AD time period, all the way back then. So anyway, I hope that this message was a baraka to you guys again. I would recommend, if you're going to test them, and you would like to do a parallel study like I usually do a parallel of the Onkelos and the Bren Septuagint together. And I think it's a really good way to study the Torah. If I was to compare the Onkelos, it's very literal. It's very literal word for word. And there are places in the Onkelos I actually like even better than the Masoretic text, just like the Septuagint. There's certain places Septuagint that I like better than Masoretic text. So again, I just want to thank thank you all for tuning in, for having ears to. I pray that the Father would give you ears to hear and eyes to see, to be able to rightly discern. Um, you know, and honestly, this is why we got to know the Father's heart. This is why we got to know his heart and what he likes and what he doesn't like, because that's the only way we're going to be able to, chew the meat and spit out the bones. You know. Okay, so anyway, thank you for joining in for this study, and those that are going to see it later. Pretty much all you guys are going to see it on YouTube, and I'll put it on Facebook as soon as I can. So shalom, guys. All right. Okay, let me just end the recording here. Okay.